Up there ahead of us is Monreal Cathedral and Abbey, and I'll just pan about somewhere off in that direction. I believe is Trapani, at least the route to Trapani. And now we're looking over Palermo. Looks like some considerable smog out there, actually. Perhaps some fires like the ones you see in the foreground. Back over there somewhere downtown Palermo. Now I'm in front of Monreale Cathedral and Abbey. In some respects the most notable in Europe. For example, with regard to mosaics, it's surpassed only by Sophia Basilica in Istanbul. And it's a mix of Norman, Byzantium, and Arabic, with a arch apparently of Roman. And what you're seeing is the largest collection of mosaics. And I'll give you some more insight, at least a source for more insight in a moment. Simply as a matter of form, I'm slowly panning both sides as well as that first shot down the nave. This is a page that will be in my notes. This left-hand side, of course, is a drawing of the church, one being that picture of Christ that you see. I should say a mosaic of Christ. It's 40 feet wide and about 18 feet high, largest in the world apparently, or at least Europe, for whatever that's worth. Now notice here that we have A, B, C, D, and next to that we have 2, 3, 4, 5 on the right, and then in the to the left we have 30, 31, 33. So here's how that relates. All those lettered ones are here. Stories of the Bible, apparently. Noah, the Tower of Babel, angel stop sacrifice, that kind of thing. Okay, and then this big numbers here. Number 1, it's that picture of Christ. These are all the items that are the numbers to the right of the vertical list of alphabet. And then down below here, bringing us up to, I think, a mixture of items that try to incorporate the political scheme, i.e. William II and religion, are these numbers to the left. I'll not try to chronicle all of these because that would be absurd. And I'm going to do the same thing up close. Here we're shooting into that right side of the upper part of the cross. I again love these depth shots. And we'll probe a little bit deeper. And now we're parallel to the altar face where we were before. And now I'm shooting the right-hand side to the right of the altar complex. We'll enter that now. Notice the beautiful, intricate inlay on the floor. And here even more, of course, as we go into this room. I can only imagine what great personages within the church occupy these sarcophagus. Now we're up very close to that right side aisle, if you will. And we'll pan into the altar that we're very close to. Jesus giving us the eagle eye. There you can see that sign in his hand that is a symbol of the word Jesus Christ. It's hard to appreciate, perhaps, on the video, the intricacy of this inlaid stone floor. It really is impressive. You can imagine how it was an impressive thing for the Roman to have mosaics done in the same fashion. Literally so much here that without someone to kind of guide me, or without a great deal of time, I can't decipher or get a foothold, if you will, or a mind hold to orientate myself to this list. Since I have some light there on that mosaic, I'll go up there and we can take a look at what these must look like as a generality. Now, I'm assuming that those are gold-covered stones. So we'll keep moving in closer. Where it looks busiest and most interesting, of course, faces are interesting to the human being. Now I'm at the limit of my normal zoom, so I'll go to a digital zoom. You'll notice that the color changed as a result of that for some reason, but we'll go in closer now. These portions look painted, don't they? It seems to be the case. Though that book seems to be mosaic, and then that garment, those garments are mosaic. Let's go back up and look at the face. Still think the face looks painted. I think too, so with Jesus' beard. I think. Can't be positive. No, maybe not. No, I think that may be mosaic. Okay. So I'm wrong. It seems I'm wrong. You may be able to get a sense of the slight unevenness or the texture of these mosaics. Notice that circle there. You can see an indentation. This is an interesting device. It looks like a candle holder, but I'm thinking they might be bells. Let's get up inside one of those babies and see. And see the clangor. Yes, I think we see that. It's like a clangor. Looks like an automatic chimer device. You pull down. Notice that's about a 3/4 circle that rope's attached to. And you pull it down and you just start swinging back and forth. Interesting. Never seen one of those before. Still haven't orientated myself, but here you can see, I think Jesus washing the feet of someone. Seems to me even my agnostic brain recalls that anecdote. Take a little bit of a look at this detail underneath. Seems to be a symbolic or graphic representation of human beings, but in different dress, if you will. Interesting, no? This looks like an interesting picture. Actually, it looks like two men scrambling up to the nipple on a breast, but I would never say that in a great church like this. This certainly looks like Jesus. Perhaps it's symbolic of him being taken out of the cave. Here's a close-up of some of the small detail. I'll show you the context in a moment. Here you can see the small stonework detail. And the last of these little bits are shot right in these little wall sections. Here's a side chapel, but not on the side. You actually approach it from the back of the church, correction, the non-altar section of the church, going back in that direction from the transept. But these framed sculptures seem to remind me of Casa that I saw yesterday. I was searching for those panels inside the aisle instead of inside the nave, which we're now looking at. So now we can begin to look at some things. So we'll go up to the top now where these windows are, and we're actually orientating off these with the large arches. So the first panel up here, which we may not be able to see because of that lighted window, there we go. It's God and heaven. It's God separating light from dark. It's God creating land, separating land from sea. It's God creating plants and critters. So this is God dividing the seas. This is God creating land from the sea. Below the first two that we looked at is this panel, much larger, of Noah building the ark. Okay, and here between the two arches is God bringing all the or Noah bringing all the animals on board. Here, under the separation of land and water, is the dove arriving, which is apparently, if I recall, telling Noah that the waters are subsiding, he can land. Going back up between those two windows, here's God creating sun, moon, and stars. And then moving over to the next one is God creating birds and fishes. And underneath the stars and sun panel is Noah hitting the rocks, i.e. land. Next to that, and under the birds and fishes, is Noah seeing the rainbow, which represents the covenant of man with God. Our next panel between windows shows God creating man and animals, and the next one is God resting. There you can see him chilling out on a rock. Perhaps there's a little fire underneath him to kind of warm his buns after his heavy labors. Why God needs to rest is beyond me. Underneath where God creates man, this is apparent Noah drunk in the vineyard, bombed out of his tree, and there's the tree. Underneath God resting is the Tower of Babel, under construction. Between our windows again, God places Adam in the Garden of Eden. Next one, what a setup, Adam alone in the Garden of Eden. You know what that's a setup. Look at the detail on his stomach. Looks like he's strangely has one hell of a hernia. It's the healing of Peter's mother-in-law. Golly, it seems like they're really reaching for subject matter now. Having done that, we'll go over and try and do it from the other side as long as it's of interest. Now remember, we'll be looking back. The last part we completed, we started up here where it's 2 and 3 in the upper right-hand corner. ended up down here. Now we shift over to this side and we start with 14 and work back up towards the front of the church. Okay, here the drama starts to kick in full gear. Here Eve is confronted by the serpent, and next door Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit. God confronts Adam and Eve for their dastardly deed and kicks them out of Eden. And this is an important one because there's a whole lineage of artistic renditions of Adam and Eve being booted out of Eden, which are important. Below that first panel, we have God commanding Abraham to sacrifice his son. Fortunately, in the nearby panel, an angel arrives just in the nick of time to tell Abraham, stop, you don't need to do it. Here Rebecca offers water to Abraham's servant. Okay, and camel I think we need to add. Here Rebecca journeys to meet Isaiah, and here I'm really out of my depth, so I'm gonna only look at the ones that are interesting to me. Adam and Eve toiling, the consequence of their mistake, and Cain and Abel sacrificing, making a sacrifice. I'll let you figure these next ones out. Here Cain kills Abel, and then God confronts Cain. Here Lamech kills Cain, completing that story. I wonder what the little guy in the lower left's for. And then the next panel, Noah gets the word from God to build an ark. Alright, God's finally ticked off enough. He's going to toast humanity and start all over again. Here Jacob dreams of the ladder. I need to find out what that story is. Jacob wrestles with the angel. Notice beneath the arches on the walls of the side aisles, redundant, are more information which we may or may not pursue if I find something interesting. This is a good one because this is Jesus throwing the money lenders out of the church. It is an irony that the Jewish were the money lenders throughout much of history. Whether it was true at that time or not, I don't know, but that they were all Jews, weren't they? Here apparently is Jesus with the adulteress. I knew it. I knew it. Oh, wait a minute. That's a different story. Here, Mary Magdalene washes the feet of Jesus. We'll focus on this a bit. In particular, I want to be close to her face. Digital zoom will go in with a different coloration, of course. Now we're on the left side of the church, of the altar, but next to the altar. I'm going to go out and take a closer look at that ceiling. Obvious Norman detail. Climb up to the terrazzo for a panoramic view, which is marginally better than what I had for the road as I was entering Monreale. But we'll do it for the fun of it and to see this area up here structurally. Notice the walls completely untreated here, but here there's some plaster. How was it originally? Okay, this is as far up as we can go. So we exit here. Exited there. What there was here originally is an interesting question. Some kind of precarious catwalk, perhaps. There, our Norman Tower. And here's the lovely cloister that we'll visit a little bit later on. And we continue. Love these kind of places. It gives us an idea of what the inside of these little passageways looked like in the otherwise ornate cathedrals. Now, was this for defensive functions also? There's the altar. So a novel view inside the church. We continue up to the next highest level. This is fun. Love this kind of stuff. It reminds me of the Gaudi Church in Barcelona. Weathering now. This is the highest point we can get up to. The other faint detail is you come down the stairs from that cupola. The rainwater comes down, apparently in large amounts for some reason, but here it's very depressed to catch the water quickly, but it just kind of kicks it out. What you can see, maybe the narrow gray ABS pipe. And the stairs that came up, and we walked up. Another church. I'll go down there somewhere and have lunch. And people live way up here. I wonder what they do. Not that far from Palermo, of course. This is a lightning arrestor of some sort. It looks like that water, when it comes out, it's just going to plummet straight on down. It's an area that gives access over a vault, but at one time it was available to the public because there's one of those devices, telescope devices, that you put a coin in. I only wonder what this is for. Another kind of novel view. I also get this up to look at these mosaics from up close. Kind of an awkward position to be shooting this. And through the glass, it may not be a very good shot. Oh, there we go. It's just for the fun of it. I have no idea what that subject matter is. There's what's-his-face wrestling with the angel. That big room over there, looks like it's a big room, was the rectory. It was a pretty sizable facility, wasn't it? Maybe that was the church they prayed in, because you certainly couldn't use the cathedral out with all those tourists in there all the time. There's another two-banger confessional, but this one doesn't offer you privacy. What's novel about this cloister are, in my opinion, the inlaid columns. They're double columns, which is somewhat unique in its own right, with a quite elaborate carving. And it looks like they're different on the capitals of each of these. Probably depicting scenes from the Bible. Some kind of scene of animals. Capitals seem just designed in nature without any animals or other critters in it. Some also seem to be in good condition, others heavily weathered. Some have had attempted restorations. Maybe in progress still, I'm not sure. Of interest in these two because they're spiraled. He's carved the geometric design in a rather elaborate pictorial capitals. Hopefully we can get a view of these. Have to get past the light from the sun. This is interesting. Looks like someone's stacking bodies. My guess is it's representation of hell. These last two columns on the right are interesting because they spiral, but alternate chunks of each spiral. I wonder if there were monks who had created this rather than artists, and each was given the license to be creative in the same way that they illustrated what are called illuminated manuscripts during the medieval period. And I wonder if those are just simple replacements in the form of restoration, those two columns. Another novel part of this cloister and its design are the 4-column corners you see here. We get an idea of the structure used. Notice that they had a deep incised groove. Then they filled that in with some material, and then the inlay was put on top of that material. It's pretty much illustrated right at the top here. These were put up here for support, but I'm not sure if that's the case because they don't tie in over there. So that's somewhat curious. The sole purpose was to hold those lights, and then it seems overkill. And walk along the edge. Maybe I can get better lighting. So we'll go down where we started a moment ago. I think this is much better. Timbers in here are, I'm sure, designed to support without damaging this structure. But here we can take a close look at this side of these 4 columns. Great deal of work. Oftentimes the columns are simply like the two we saw to my left that look new. They're just simple columns. They're characterized by absolute identicalness, as opposed to these, which are characterized by the exact opposite. Refreshingly so, I might add. Here are two men with, it looks like shields and clubs. Perhaps a battle scene. And I think this is just the beginning of the restoration, some kind of fill-in, and then the artist comes back and does the final sculpturing. The ants have got a purpose. This is their route, but for what is a good question. They seem to be up there. Now they still continue on. Ants continue their parade on up through here, jogging a little bit to the left, and up a little farther. Continue up. There must be a cache of food up there somewhere they're after. These could be woodpeckers given their upside down orientation. Another difference, normally the columns would be matched, but here they're purposely mismatched. Interesting is the bases of these columns seem to be the same except for the detail right down here in the corner. This appears to be a snake decor or motif. The one next to it you can see it's simply design. A mixed match, but for the first time a checkerboard design. And my guess is that even when we look at these vertical stripes, if you will, the actual inlay will be a different design. This is probably one of the great examples of intentional, purposeful creativity and the desire to be different. A very novel concept to be found in early art, not to mention Christian art, at least until you hit the 1400 and the Renaissance. Here's a kind of a standard with the faces inside, which makes it interesting. And look at also, this looks like an overlay, like almost a sheet of plaster like the surgeon uses when he installs a cast on your arm or leg, a layer of plaster, at least in the old days. Be curious, it looks like snakes. But it can't be just snakes because they have legs. So this side, a couple of lions. Could this be that Norman England motif? At the end of this, it appears to be a bird, perhaps an eagle, with a serpent in its mouth. Position of what may be our woodpeckers. Notice here it's that standard acanthus leaf, I think they call it, but with the addition of what look like rams and some other animals at the corners, at least, and in the center another beast of some sort. But notice up at the top, it looks like something like wolves or some kind of dog. Here it's interesting. You've got that bird on the side, which may be an eagle, but then you have a lion attacking a man. I think he's done a little more than that to his arm. It seems to reflect workers with their various tools, mallets on the right. Can't see what this implement of the man here on the left in the middle is. Looking at the other side, can I be sure what these tools are? Knife. How many representations of man's face have I seen in my travels? The archaeologists have numbered all of these, so everything's cataloged well. Anything else, some are rather simple, like the acanthus leaves, one with the small women's faces in it, versus this very involved 3D vignette. But of what? Potential to tell an entire story by wrapping all the way around. And perhaps this did exactly that. Symbols of the church, perhaps? People who created these have made a record at a time now. We're looking at musical instruments here. Like, look at the one on the left. Is that a musical instrument? And his hand's on the top, upper part of it? Snake? Ah, Adam and Eve got that one hammered. Good boy, Scott. Eve. It looks more like the serpent's taking a bite of the apple. Why didn't they throw him out? Here, the angels, looks like they may be expelling Adam and Eve, rather fully clothed. And here they are laboring, I'll be danged. Of course we can see angel and angel. Don't know what the other characters symbolize. Again, rather straightforward. Just before we reach the corner, probably the simplest conceptual design. We are at the four corners again, the four corner posts. You must imagine that the person who was given the right to design and execute this one was a special person of all the people involved, whether artist or priest. But you would think that he would have had as his primary attribute his skills as an artist, as a sculptor. Not terribly imaginative motif or story, it seems. Perhaps that's its point. It forms one of the major supports for the building. Maybe it's portraying the major supports of the church. For your information, I've only done one of these walls. There's only 3 more to go, so hold on. Hopefully these guys weren't that creative. Just to see a bit of the motif on the outside. Now this has not been restored or embellished, at least in recent times, as you can see. So it's a very subtle design as seen from a distance. And notice down at the end, that corner is distinctive in having its own little peristyle room, if you will. And we'll now go down there. I'll stop here so we can get a sense of how it looks to me to see these variations in design, so completely atypical. Focus a little bit on the individual details of some of these columns that go down this wall. Portraying St. John, who I believe was crucified upside down. And what I don't see any of is a variation in the style of the columns. I'd say they all seem the same, but the very one I was about to say that for seemed different. It certainly is thicker here than it is up there where it bows in just before the circular portion. And the reverse is true almost at the bottom, although this is pretty much consistent design here. Interesting because it seems to be a covey of birds, like maybe doves or something. Obviously lions devouring a bull or some other animal. Getting too much discussion and spending too much time, this doesn't look good for some of these people. If all artists started off with exactly the same capital form, in other words, it was poured as a block, and then each of them had the right to carve out what they chose to. I think this panel portrays birds being attacked by, or vice versa, serpents. This pretty black one, I like that black and gold, dramatic it seems. Thinking that this one on the right has been redone. Notice the considerable detail, particularly in that bird right there. Also in this one the same. And one may be a reproduction, because it looks pretty detailed. At this base is this leaf that's kind of melted into this joint. First time I've seen that. Again, these little balls, or half balls, are another distinction. This side gets a lot of the weather, because those look pretty washed out, dulled, if you will. The difference between the restored sections and the originals, how washed out this seems to be. I'll just walk through, you look at the exterior walls of the cloister, in other words, away from the columned walls, just so you can see. Oftentimes statues were here, and of course in many places there were, all along where those benches were sarcophaguses and other niches where important people's bones or artifacts or memorabilia remained. If these were once filled with stained glass or something of that nature, or what these doorways entered into. This might have been another chapel or something, although I can hear a lot of noise coming from in there. I will get some shots of this curious four corner with what looks like an interesting water feature, maybe almost a lotus flower in the center there. But that interplay of arches in different planes is interesting. And let the camera show you how it looks as you move through it, or past it at least, and then we'll go into it in a moment, like now. Here, as I pan up, you'll see that each of these little sections is done differently. There is absolutely no intent to have intentional repetition. Interesting, it's a collection of worms. You wonder what it's from, though. It's had some interesting detail, but because it's just been leaking water, it's just gathered a great deal of discoloration and moss and other bits of debris on it. And now it's pretty much uninteresting. Move just for the interplay of the columns. It must have been pretty when there was water tumbling into that to add to the reverie surrounding your contemplations. What it must have been like to spend hours perhaps roaming and walking about in this garden or around this cloister, occasionally looking up at the large cathedral and imagining that soon you would be in there praying, perhaps in your mind even more directly with your God. A little bit different corner detail, whatever it is. Or just a few that have something in the center between the two columns as opposed to the corners. Move towards the center where this palm tree is. You move up a more than gentle slope, but it is still just a slope. What might have been here in the past is interesting. You would think a well or a fountain. A big day in the neighborhood that I chose to be up here, and this neighborhood goes all the way to the right some distance and then quite a ways back to the left to the cathedral itself. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but that certainly looks like it. Royalty there, so it's historical in nature and has to be religious. So I think I saw earlier a segment of the parade that had probably what were traditional women's clothing worn by ladies. These may be flags that are equally